But anyway, this session is going to be a little bit about what is going on with the cloud, or the idea of hosting applications, hosting data, hosting various types of services inside of the web, rather than necessarily on your machine or on a server that you're running yourself. And I'm going to go through a lot of different things, but let's see. This is who I am. I used to be at Novell. I left Novell about a year ago almost, shortly after my job got really hard there, being a community manager. I'm now a community manager for Bungee Labs, and we make a platform called Bungee Connect. I host a podcast these days called The Bungee Line, and we focus entirely on web APIs and web development and community building within that kind of space. So that's with a gentleman named Alex Barnett, who is my partner in crime, I guess, on the show, as well as a former Microsoft guy. So I'm constantly bringing people from open source community on the show. He's constantly bringing people from the Microsoft side and from the less than open source side, and it's fun. We get a little tension going. I also have a blog, reverendted.wordpress.com, so if you want to join me there, you can check out what I'm doing, and every once in a while I still actually post something there. And let's see. This is what I'm going to cover. And I'm going to cover this partly discussionary. We're going to talk about platform as a service. We're going to talk about what my company's platform is that we're offering as a service. And we're going to talk about freedom and sharing in the cloud, because there's some very, very interesting stuff involving the GPL and when you want to share software, when it doesn't really get distributed, when it all stays in the cloud and doesn't really have a site that it moves from one site to another. And we're going to talk about some of those issues, because it brings up a lot of interesting stuff, and it brings in interesting characters as well. People like Richard Stallman and Tim O'Reilly, who have had some intellectual battles on the net, or maybe more, let's not call them battles, let's call them discussions on the net regarding some of this. So this is what my presentation will be. And somewhere during this, what I'm hoping is that I can somehow figure out how to use my 3 typing fingers and hold this microphone at the same time. And it's going to be a little bit of kind of a, like, Twister or something. Okay, so what is platform as a service? You guys have heard of probably software as a service, right? Come on, give me some nods. I know it's a lot of job. You've heard of software as a service. Thanks, Elon. So you've heard of that, and Salesforce.com is like the poster child for doing software as a service. They're the ones that did the first CRM, customer relationship management, in the cloud. And it's interesting. They've been successful. They've shown that the model works, and suddenly a whole bunch of other services have come online. And Amazon is probably now the company that's offering the biggest breadth of different services. You can get servers in the cloud from Amazon, in their elastic computing cloud. You can get storage with their simple storage service. You can get database with their simple DB. They've got a gamut of different things out there. But there's only a few companies that are starting to offer software development in the cloud, and software development and deployment in the cloud. The actual hosting of your application becomes part of that. And that means your testing cycle as well. There are those, now that Google has announced Google App Engine, there are those who are saying, wow, okay, Salesforce is doing it, Google's doing it, this is validating the space that it exists out there. So really, the first part of what we're calling platform as a service, and this will be my company's definition, Bungee Labs' definition more than anything else, it's the full software cycle all in the browser, all through the browser, no local installs, no plugins. Your development, your testing, and your deployment and hosting of your application all happen in one environment. The classic software model of I develop on my machine, then I move it over to the testing servers, and the testing department files bugs, and I continue that cycle, and then finally we release the software. That goes away in this model. The next one on it is, we look at it also as very important that people have rich experiences on the desktop. They use highly interactive apps, and they expect that same kind of interactivity. A lot of people doing platform as a service right now are still doing the static web browser page refresh each time that you want to do any kind of transaction with the application. And that doesn't end up being quite as smooth an experience as what you see on the traditional desktop apps. Next one is, the internet's become a platform, There's all kinds of different web service providers out there, starting with the SOAP revolution that happened, and now everything's moving into REST. So these kind of things make it so that there's all kinds of information out there on the web. Google has now grown to something like 57 different APIs that they provide alone. These become resources to you. Web services and databases, then, these should also be something that you can get at, and they should be highly automated. Collaboration should also be possible. You shouldn't have to develop alone. You should be able to check out code, check in code, and work with other developers. And reliability, scalability, and all of the security considerations of your software stack, everything up to your app, you should still have to code your own security into your app. But everything below that we have to deal with, am I on the latest Apache patch? Have I put the latest Tomcat security patches in place? Whatever your whole stack is, that stuff should be taken out if there's really a good platform as a service offering going on. The scalability as well. How many servers do I need to fail over to? That should all be handled for you. If your app is wildly successful, you shouldn't have the barrier that would normally happen if you were doing your own data center hosting. So that's part of it as well. And then built-in instrumentation. How many developers, if I may just ask? Okay, those of you who develop software, have you ever had that situation where you develop something and then, especially if you're doing a web app, somebody from a marketing department comes to you and says, hey, we need to know how many clicks on that little piece right here, and we need to know what happens next after that. A good software as a service type platform or platform as a service should also have all the instrumentation up and down through it, so you can meter your app, and it shouldn't be, I have to refactor all of my code in order to do that, which is often the case, just to get some tiny metrics out. So that is what we consider platform as a service at Bungee Labs. Rich interaction, full development through the deployment cycle, the automated integration of all the different services, including data and web services, collaboration, reliability, scalability taken out from the stack, and the built-in instrumentation. That makes the whole stack. Bungee Connect is what my company offers. You can go to bungeeconnect.com and you can get an account. We have free development online, and I want to show you just a real quick look at the kind of applications that we're talking about, because I mentioned this whole rich interactivity. So let's take a look at an application. This is a calendar application that we created on our platform. It's licensed under actually a BSD style license. So if you look at this application and you think, hey, I'd like to do a few things, a few modifications on it, if you have a Bungee Connect account, you can import it right into your own workspace, and then you can start making modifications. And whatever changes you make, you don't have to give back to Bungee Labs. It's your own changes. You can submit it back out there yourself, because we have something we call our software share. So you could share it with other people if you want, but we don't make that compulsory. It's about the most liberal license we could find on it, so we just repurposed the BSD style license for that. But what does it do? Let's see. This is where I get creative with holding microphone and doing keyboard at the same time. Some of the things it does. This application right here is one that I've already logged into, and hopefully my internet connection is going to be working okay. You'll notice I've got a few different calendar sources right here, and that's really what it's doing, is it's pulling together calendars. And what I want to do right now is, let's see where we can, settings, got moved recently. So the settings area right here, I can actually set up new calendars if I want to, and there's several different calendars it handles. This is actually using a MySQL data store, so that's what native is. It can also read from Facebook. Facebook does not have a write API to their calendar, so it doesn't write back to that. We've got Google Calendar, which is a read-write calendar source using the GData protocol, which is a REST-based protocol based on Atom. Microsoft Exchange, we're able to connect to via their WebDAV shares. We're able to hit Salesforce as well, and we're able to hit iCalendar. Salesforce is a SOAP web service. iCalendar are just whatever you publish on a URL with an iCal file. So these are the kind of calendars that we support on there, and these are all just different web services brought together. And rather than go through all of those, let's jump back to the calendar here and take a look at a couple different views, and I'll show you a few tricks with it here. That is dependent on internet connectivity. There it is. So we're looking at a full week view right now, and most of what I have on this full week view is looking like it's this week, and it's mostly my Exchange data. So I'm going to select Google right here, and I'm going to put a new calendar appointment on here. Present at LUG Radio, and we will spare you much more typing with my 2 fingers. And that appointment just wrote to my Google Calendar immediately when I did that, and I guess we could open it up here, but it's a little bit hard with just one hand. What I want to do instead is I'm going to double-click that guy and open up a window right here and just show you the kind of rich interactivity. So there's this overlay right here that I can move around the screen if I want to, and I can, of course, change times because I'm actually presenting this at a little bit different time. Well, let's get a different time going on this, and let's make it a different end time. And I don't think I want it like that. 11:30, maybe we'll go till 1 p.m. and okay that, and it changes right there. I can also, of course, do different things like dragging and dropping of appointments, and I could move it over to a different date if I wanted to. And this is what I mean by rich interactivity. Drag and drop like somebody would expect inside the browser. Double click on something, it opens up different components, and there's quite a bit more that the application can do. Let's bring that back on over. But that's just some of the basics of what this kind of environment does for us. And at the same time, it's doing all the marshaling of services and things back to the data center. So let's see, one last thing here. I think what I'd like to do is change the date here and move to the 9th. It doesn't update behind there. I was looking for that. A lot of the different apps you'll find when you're changing data, things will move around right inside. We have I'll have to show that probably through a different window. But part of the rich interactivity of the platform that we offer is also that as you have multiple windows open, the different views of the same data. If you make a change in one window, you don't have to write any extra code to get it to change across multiple windows. That's just part of what a platform should be able to do for you, even on the web. Most web development environments cannot do that. So let's see. Let's hit the what does it look like to develop in this environment. I've been working on, hey Dave Camp, I've been working on a Google Contacts API. Google Contacts API came out sometime, I think, in February, if I'm not mistaken. It was early March. And so I've been trying to wrap that into a library inside of here. And this is the builder environment that we work with. This is our IDE, and I want to open up a couple things and just show you a little bit of what I've been working on. And let's see, I've got a sample app. This is importable code, by the way, so you can bring this into your own environment. And let's see. I think what we'll do here is and this is the tricky part, because now I've got to get special characters going. Oh, it does work. So I've been wrapping up this library right here so that I could see different things inside my contacts library, so that I could add contacts in and various other types of things. But that's all a bug inside my code. But that's all just written right inside of this environment. So there's a few different things that we provide. We provide various type libraries here. We provide object-oriented environment with things like, well, class inheritance. This class right here actually inherits from another class. So we've got a sophisticated object model for object-oriented programming. We've got functions. We've got fields inside of classes and those kind of things. It's a full environment. So when you create this, when you create any kind of application inside of it, you can use whatever kind of concepts of object-oriented programming you might be used to. And then a little bit beyond that. How many object-oriented programmers in here? Oh, those? Okay. So when I say a little bit beyond that, one of the things that's really strange about working in the web space is your presentation is so far removed from the platform hosting the presentation when you're dealing with platform as a service. So your actual view layer ends up at somebody's browser, which was designed to be a stateless technology, far removed from the actual server hosting all the application. And what that means is to do rich interactivity that is not just happening in the browser, like Google Maps, JavaScript, it happens in the browser. All the logic is processed at the browser. When you want to have all that stuff processed at a data center, now what do you do as far as a development model? Well, it turns out that there are some things that break down about the traditional model view controller design architectural pattern that's available. So we created a slightly different one called Model View Adapter. And this is how we managed to do some of the rich interactions that we have, where it's actually processed at the data center and the view stays updated for the user. It's almost like it's using the browser as a thin client. So anyway, with what we've got right there, this gets us into a couple topics here. As a developer, you can develop your code in a platform, our platform. You can collaborate with other developers. You can deploy it, and users get at it. That's what we're trying to do with the development in the cloud. We also have made very clear developer agreements out there that say you own your IP. Whatever you create, you can share or not share however you want. We don't force upon you that your code has to be open to other people. You can have it. You don't have to share it. So you own your IP. You're in control of that as well. And if anybody pulls this down from, I imagine they'll have a website to host this on, or you can always email me, Ted@Bungee Labs. You can get the developer license agreement at that URL. But there are some other questions that come along with this. Anybody here, are there people who study the GPL and like it's almost like was handed down from Oregon? So those that know the GPL fairly well may know that there's a way that they phrase things in the GPL about what triggers software, what triggers the GPL. And it's an interesting set of wording that they use in that. It was identified by Tim O'Reilly in some articles online as the SAS loophole. And that's because the word convey is used in the GPL, right in its terms and conditions, to convey a work means any kind of propagation that enables other parties to make or receive copies. Mere interaction with a user through a computer network with no transfer of a copy is not conveying. This is how companies that are doing services online, not just platform as a service, but service online like Google, doing search online, or other vendors out there. This is how they manage to use Linux, make modifications to Linux, and are not held by the GPL to open up that code, because the GPL clearly leaves that out. They're not conveying it, they're just offering an online service. There was a question.
Yeah, I saw an article the other day. Google Code is blocking the AGPL, which is modified to closest.
I'll hit the AGPL in just a moment. Yeah, so and that is interesting. So Tim O'Reilly wrote about this, and this is actually not a recent article. If you look there, it's July of last year. So this is almost a year old. This is getting close to a year old that Tim O'Reilly started writing about this. And he's actually referring to stuff that he wrote a few years before as well in these articles. But he's saying that there's an article that GPL has no networked future. And this gets to be really fascinating stuff when you start looking at it, because as soon as you're in these cloud-based development environments, and there's a bunch of them out there. Bungee Connect is one of them. Google, of course, just released their app engine. There's a Ruby on Rails framework called Heroku that is now out there. There's, of course, Salesforce.com has Force.com now, which is also doing this kind of thing. There's a lot of this stuff happening. Some of them using open source ideals, some of them using open source language, but not necessarily ideals. What happens when you're not conveying your code? What happens to developers when they want to share their code? How do you enforce the GPL when it doesn't really convey by leaving a site to another site? Is conveying just giving another person access to the source code? There become a whole bunch of questions in that. That's why the company Affero turned over their public license to the Free Software Foundation, and it became the GNU Affero General Public License, which is now in version 3 in parallel with the GPL 3. And it's similar to the General Public License in all ways, except it takes out the clause of having to convey the software. And now what it essentially becomes is if you get at the source code and you modify the source code in any way, you owe that code back. Anything that might be put under the Affero GPL if you're going to make mods to it, it's no longer the same thing as being a service provider and saying, well, we don't have to give that out. So this one is really trying to plug up the loophole inside of the GPL that allows software as a service providers, including platform as a service providers, to get around having to contribute their code back. One way that our CEO puts it this way, there are two types of companies dealing with open source. There are the companies that have open source projects that are out there that are actively contributing open source, and then there are companies that are vacuums of open source. My company right now, by the way, is a vacuum of open source. We intend this year to start turning that around. But that's pretty much where things are at the moment. So that's why this thing exists. Interestingly, there is no limited version of the AGPL at this point. There's no LGPL equivalent within the AGPL space, which is one that we're really interested in as a company as well. So when you get into software sharing, here's how my company has helped solve some of this. When developers want to share code with each other, what we've got planned out for what we're calling our share, for people being able to share stuff, is two different options, a source options path and a non-source option path with sub-options below those. Non-source I'll hit really quickly. It's not quite as interesting. It doesn't have as much three-dimensional chess involved. But the licenses that we have what we call a Type P, a publication license. And this is pretty much just the license that if you're collaborating with other developers, you pretty much grant them by just inviting them into a design group with you, which is a collaboration group. You grant them a publication license, which means that they can read your source code, but they're not bound to anything other than just collaborating with you. It doesn't extend beyond that. There's a Type E embedded, which is sort of like the Windows model of DLLs, where you've got this binary library that works out there. So that's not quite as interesting. When you want to start sharing code openly, when you want to share your source code, we of course have just taken the GNU Affero GPL or the AGPL and just wrapped that completely and said that this is one license model you can choose inside of our platform. And what that means is you put your code under that. It doesn't matter where anybody goes with it. If they use that code, they have to open up whatever modifications they do. Then we've done what we call a library source license. And this is where it gets a little interesting. Because of a few of the things that the GPL allows, we had to make a modification for platform as a service where we decided to say, okay, we're going to make a type L, like copy left, and we're going to make a type R, like copy right. And the type R is very much like a BSD type license. You're not compelled to give your code back. You may, if you want, you may publish it openly. You don't have to. The type L is if you do make modifications on it, this is based off of the LGPL. It doesn't mean that everything you build with it would be I guess that what some people call that viral or radioactive nature of the GPL. This is more of you can take a component, but if you modify that specific component that you've taken, you need to contribute back the code that you've modified. But you do not need to, anything that you've built around it, that you've linked into it, you don't have to contribute that back. You can still just clip into it. This one is, of course, the one that is the most, I guess, effective if you want to really enforce heavy sharing, but it's also the one a lot of people, when they're trying to build their own project, will avoid that because it means that their project also has to be completely open to use anything AGPL. So that's sort of how we've handled the idea of developers sharing with other developers on top of our platform. So that gets you a little bit further on there. The summary on this then is that because the GPL3, even GPL3 exempts service providers from supplying their code modifications, it means that developers have to have different licensing for this new generation of platform-based stuff. And that's what we're trying to start solving with what I just showed you a moment ago. But the question comes to, what does Bungee Labs do, makers of Bungee Connect? What do we do with all the IP that we have? Well, we try to contribute and reciprocate right now. We are participating in a few different projects only on the very most simple way, which I'll hit in just a moment. But our staff are mostly geeks themselves. Our data center guy is a Debian geek. We have many Ubuntu guys in there. Being based in where we are, which is just about 10 miles up the road from where Novell is, we also have a couple guys using OpenSUSE still. And that means that we have a few people that are fairly into the open source ideals. So Here's a whole bunch of relevant reading, by the way. Everything I've talked about so far, this will link back to. So, here are the kind of projects that Bungee Labs currently vacuums, if you want to look at us as a open source vacuum. We've used Subversion, we've used Ubuntu and SUSE, we've used Debian, and we've used, of course, the whole new tool chain and all kinds of other new tools. MediaWiki is what our documentation's in. Mantis is what we do our bug tracking in. Postgres is what our main database is out there, but we do use MySQL for a few side projects, like the calendar project I showed you. Apache, of course, is our web platform, and Memcached is what we're using, actually rolling it out this month to up the scalability of our platform. This huge stack here. We've contributed back a lot of different bug fixes. So we try to kill bugs, and that's one of the ways that we participate in projects right now. But there's still a whole stack of IP that is out there that we have. And so this brings me to a friend of mine who is in the Netherlands, somebody I met through LUG Radio Live in the UK, my Viking friend, Peter, who is about 8 feet tall and has huge long hair down to here and this beard here. And he's one of those people that bears down on you and talks to you about freedom and open source and idealism, and you know the man. So Peter actually pointed this article out to me when I was talking last summer at LUG Radio Live. He pointed out that Richard Stallman wrote this thing called the Java Trap. And right now, my company's platform, this applies to. And many other platforms this will apply to as well. Yeah, you can have software sharing and things happening up here at the top level, but everything underneath, if it's all proprietary, you fall into what Richard Stallman calls the Java Trap, which is formally, because of Java not being under the GPL, being considered a proprietary platform at the time that he wrote this. He was pointing out that, yeah, you can have open source code in a proprietary language and therefore have that code not have full freedom the way on a language that is more open, a platform style that is more open. So he put on this head note as well, by the way, that Sun has put their Java under the GPL now, and this changes it. But the basic philosophy that he was getting at here is a platform that is proprietary, you can have all the freedom and love up there at the top level, but it doesn't quite count as much as a fully open stack. Does that make sense? So that's Richard Stallman's take on that. That would apply to Bungee Labs today, which is why I say we're looking at what is our course for starting to open up our platform over time. There are still a lot of things that are ugly blemishes and things underneath the hood for opening up the code that we're working on. But there's a few other questions. Any company that comes along that has started from a proprietary background and gone to investors ends up with a question coming from investors of how are we going to get our money back when you open source if you just give it away? And so a lot of companies solve this different ways. The speaker who was up here just before me was from MySQL, and he was talking about how they have handled that by having a dual license. They're under GPL, anybody can use it, but as soon as you want to make commercial software with it, you can buy a license, so you're not under the GPL strictly. So that's one of the kind of considerations that exists is what is the way that you handle that. So questions most profound. This is what we're doing as a company right now. We're looking at how do you open up your platform, and we're looking at it this way. Do we build up demand for our platform being open first, or do we open the platform in order to build demand for a platform? We're right now choosing the top route right there, the bottom route right there, of trying to make it a platform that is so compelling that people start saying, you know, this really ought to be open. And we're starting to get a little bit of that kind of pressure, and so then that will hopefully motivate us a little bit. But this top scenario right here is not what we want to do as a company. You've probably seen companies, they announce that they're open source, therefore you should use our stuff. And that's the route we're not trying to go with. We're trying to get to we want to have compelling technology, and we want people to say it should be open. I'm pleased that our CEO, a guy named Martin Plain, used to be at a company called Real Networks, some of you might have heard of. He just came back from the OSBC, the Open Source Business Conference, and I was really happy to hear him saying, all right, going to have to happen. We're going to have to move faster on this. So he's actually he came back with religion. Not that he didn't have it before. He's done this stuff, but he had a new sort of sense of urgency on things. So anyway, the main thing that I was trying to get to in the whole talk here is give you a quick look at our platform. Hopefully maybe some of you will look at the platform and say, hey, maybe I want to try that out. Maybe I want to learn the platform, in which case you can interact with me. I'm ted@bungeelabs.com. And I wanted to give you a quick look at it. But the other thing is I wanted to talk about some of these kind of issues because I think it's very, very relevant to us, those of us who have been in the open source community for a little while, those of us who care about the ethics around software sharing and those kind of things. I think it's one of the things that we have to start thinking about because the wave that's happening right now, especially with Google jumping on board, they've made a platform for Python in the cloud, hosted. With those kind of things happening, we have to start looking at it and thinking about what do the implications of no longer conveying software, what does that mean for freedom of code? And if you look at the various extremes, Salesforce on one extreme, extremely proprietary platform with no intent of really opening that up. You look at some of the other opposite extremes, Heroku's probably on the opposite extreme. You can see it spans a full gamut. So that's kind of more of a think piece that I'm trying to get out there. Yes, sir?
I see a lot of people talking about the IP, who owns the IP, etc. Well, you look at a lot of these apps, they're fairly simple. The IP is probably not that great. It's the data that's very important. I don't see anyone out there talking about who owns the data in the cloud.
So the question there is a lot of people talk about the intellectual property of the app itself, but more important than the app and the logic that you might have for your app is who owns the data in the cloud.
The IP to build out probably not that exciting. In fact, the source got leaked a while ago. The data is very valuable.
Yeah, the data becomes very valuable. And you get into a few different things here. And this is one of the things that we as a company end up having to walk down as well. I talked to, where'd she go? Oh, there she is. I talked to a friend at, let's just say Linden Labs, about this while I was down at SoCal Linux Expo not too long ago. And they pointed out that, part of the reason why they can't, there's Elon, runs the show. She was saying, one of the reasons not to open up an entire stack is when you have people's personal identities inside that stack, you have some responsibility besides just opening code just because it's the right thing to do with code. There's a certain amount of protection. And that would apply to a lot of open source, not open source, that would platform as a service providers out there would have that as well. But the data that's on there also may be your app data, and does the platform provider own the app data, or do you? Part of what we've done so far as a company is we've made it possible to hook up to Postgres, we've made it possible to hook up to MySQL, or to use any web service-based data store, but we haven't gotten into the business of hosting data ourselves because of that very reason. That's a different approach than what, say, Salesforce does. Salesforce actually has, SFQL or SQL, I can't remember what they call it, but they have their own query language and data store protocols. Amazon actually offers a database service as well, but their terms are very much you own your data on that. But you bring up a good point, and I don't bring up any kind of answer except just to sort of elucidate, I guess. Other questions? Yes, sir.
These platforms service come out, I guess the biggest challenges or protections that a developer has to make is, say, for instance, the Google App Engine. We as a company have logged into Google App Engine forever. So, how do you see that
It's a good question. So if I may try to restate it as best I can, but there's some question going on right now in various blogs, especially like some of the industry pundit type blogs, about what Google App Engine means. And so you're in Python inside of a developer environment hosted there. What's your escape hatch? How do you get out is one of the questions right now. And are you permanently bound to that platform in order to proceed? I don't know the answer on that one. This just happened on like Monday, I think it was, that the announcement happened, and I've been on the road all week and not able to do nearly as much web surfing as I want to. You'd think that the Bay Area would be completely covered right now with web Wi-Fi, but I'm at Jupiter inside of in Berkeley down there drinking beer and not being able to get Wi-Fi even off their own wireless network. So I've gotten way behind on it. I don't know all the issues, and I haven't read everything on Google's App Engine at this point and what it means. So the point that you were made, just so I can repeat it so people can hear, is it really does depend on what you tie into with your app. Your Python code is completely exportable, but what have you tied into with your Python code is have you linked into their data storage service? And if you have, what's the portability there? And I think that's where a lot of the question is right now. There's much to be discovered, I think, in that area. So, again, no answers, but yes, that's the kind of thinking that I'm looking for. Others? Well, with that, if you guys have questions for me, if you want to see more of Bungee Connect at any point, I'd love to show it during the show. But my main point for being here was just to sort of get some of the ideas of platform as a service out there and talk about what it means to do freedom in the cloud. So thank you very much for joining me for the lunchtime extravaganza.